Today we're gonna have a look at yet another affordable Chinese banger, with this one being very similar to the design language of the NPO-1S, but since this is not a direct clone, I would definitely recommend you to stick around for the entirety of this video, because it might not be exactly what you think it is. However, if you've been interested in picking up an NPO-1 or an NPO-1S, this might just be the one for you. But before we do that, if you're at all interested in peripheral reviews, I would definitely recommend you to hit that subscribe button and the bell right next to it, because I'm constantly uploading videos like these. And also, as a quick disclaimer, I bought this mouse with my own money, so obviously my opinions are completely my own, and there won't be any affiliate links down in the description below. Getting into the boring stuff, the mouse comes inside of this packaging. Inside of the packaging you get a USB-A to USB-C cable. The cable itself is pretty stiff, I wouldn't recommend using it in a wired mode. Then you get this USB-A to USB-C adapter, and of course also the 1K receiver to plug it in. There is actually also a pro version of this, but the only real difference is the bigger battery, so I would definitely recommend you to get the normal version since this one also supports 8K hertz, but we'll talk much more about that later. My unit currently is at around 53 grams, but that is because I heavily modified mine. At a stock condition, this one will sit around 60 to 61 grams with that 300 mAh battery, and with the pro version it will sit around 64 to 65 grams. As a quick comparison to the NPO-1S here, this one will in a stock condition with the new 4K version sit at around 70 grams. So the normal version here on the GHERO is almost 10 grams lighter. In terms of the build quality on the GHERO, this is one of the best mice I've ever held in my hand, and I feel like I'm saying this like in almost every single video, because the bar in terms of quality when it comes to these Chinese mice has just been raised like crazy over the past 2 years. They simply keep getting better and better, more rigid, better click tolerances, less button wobble, and all that good stuff, and I'm all for it. These are some of the best main clicks that I've ever felt in my entire life when it comes to the actual tolerances. Despite cutting into the base like crazy, it is still super rigid when I try to really squeeze it. And when I did the squeeze test when initially unboxing it in a stock condition, I could absolutely stubby squeeze it and nothing happened to this thing. In terms of the overall quality and the click experience, this thing is really fucking nice, especially considering that this is only $50. But now to the most interesting part, the shape. When we first saw this mouse advertised, most of us thought that this was going to be a one-to-one NPO-1S clone, but sadly that is just not true. I have my NPO-1S here and my NPO-1 over here, and as you can see, the overall design language and the layout from beneath is super similar. And in terms of which mouse this feels closest to, I would still say that this is much more similar to the NPO-1S than the NPO-1, because the NPO-1 does feel quite a bit more bulky. However, it is best explained as a mixture of both of these shapes and sizes. The GHERO has this slightly more bulky hump that is a tiny bit more restrictive and more supportive. I can really feel the left rear side of the hump here, unlike my NPO-1S where it simply just feels like I'm only supporting my grip underneath here and not so much on this left side. I feel like I have more freedom with the NPO-1S, but when I go over to the NPO-1, it definitely feels more bulky and more supportive, but that left side does seem pretty similar to the GHERO. In terms of the front width, this thing is definitely not as narrow towards the front as the NPO-1S. As you can see here as well, you might be able to spot that it is slightly more narrow towards the front on the NPO-1S, and that is definitely something that you can feel when you compare these two mice to each other. The width is definitely right in between these two mice when it comes to the front here, and yet again when I compare these mice back to back to back, it really just is a mixture of these two sizes. Other than that, there's no other shape to compare this thing to, especially because this is not an ergo mouse, this is an asymmetric mouse. In terms of the coating, I'm pretty sure that this one doesn't even have one. When I hold it in my hands, I feel like I can feel this micro texture plastic, but when I tried to scratch it with my knife here on the side, I didn't find any signs of a coating. I was instantly scratching the plastic of the mouse itself and I couldn't see that there was a coating on top of it, and that does align with what I'm feeling in terms of that micro textured plastic. However, I definitely want to note here that I could be wrong since I didn't ask the manufacturer themselves. Comparing it to the other 40 mice or something that I have right next to me on my wall, this feels different than each and every single one of them. And if this actually is uncoated micro textured plastic, this is the best thing that I've ever experienced in terms of non-coated mice so far. because once your hand actually just gets warm, this thing really does grip. And I've never even had any slipping issues at all. And I used to be that guy that uses grips on all of his mice just because I don't have enough grip because of my dry hands, but I don't have that issue on this mouse, and I'm very happy to say that. In terms of the buttons, this one uses the Huano Blue Shell Pink Dots. They are probably the best toleranced mouse 1 and mouse 2 that I have ever felt. There is virtually no pre-travel, and even when I click my mouse click at the very front here, which often is an issue with mice, I barely have any post-travel here. This is not noticeable in game to me whatsoever. The side buttons are also super dope. They are not too heavy and I didn't have any issues with them at all in Fortnite. Normally there's also a DPI button, but I took that thing out. And then the scroll is definitely spammable. It is a bit more on the lighter side, but you do have those defined steps. Overall, a great combination, and it also doesn't feel or sound cheap at all. Yet again, awesome tolerances. And in terms of mouse 3, when you click that scroll wheel in, it is definitely a bit more heavy, not as spammable. But yet again, I didn't have any issues with that in game whatsoever. The stock skates are these dyed PTFE skates. I personally found them a bit too slow for my likings, and that is one of the main reasons why I actually did mod my mouse, just because I could then sand the bottom of the mouse so that I could use any skates in my arsenal. And the skates that I'm using here are the X-Lite Pulsar skates, but these are core pads. These are especially readily available if you live in Europe, where you can get them from corepad.de. And also they're my favorite mouse skate. In terms of the battery life on this unit, which is the non-pro version that spots a 300 mAh battery, it lasted me a whole week of usage without even charging it once. So what that means is I unboxed it, used it for a full week, every single day, all day long, and it didn't die until my 7th day. That is pretty impressive, and also the reason why I went for a 150 mAh battery for my mod to make it a bit more light. However, definitely do note that if you use 4K polling rate or even 8K, it would definitely only be half as long or even a quarter as long if you go for that 8K polling rate. So if very high polling rate is something that you're very interested in, definitely go for the pro version, unless you are fine with having to charge your mouse every other day. And that goes for most mice out there. These batteries drain very quickly on high polling rate. Talking about high polling rate, I can't actually use either 2K, 4K, or 8K because I don't have the dongle for it. However, the dongle is only $12 on AliExpress, and I will make sure to list everything down below for you. Once I get my 8K dongle in, I will definitely be doing some testing on Kovacs, since I'm sort of getting into aim training again and doing voltaic benchmarks. So definitely go follow me on Twitter if you want to be informed about that, because I won't do a separate video just for that probably. In terms of the versions and color options, these are all supposed to launch in all of their colors, no matter if you get the normal or the pro version, and the different colors that you can get are the following on your screen. For the software, I will yet again link it down in the description below for you guys. When you do open it up on the right hand side, you can change your debounce time. I usually go for 2 milliseconds, and I have not had any double clicking issues at all in a second. This setting is actually a sleep timer on when your mouse will go to sleep on wireless mode. After that, you can change your DPI here, and you can also change your polling rate. And on the sensor mode, I definitely recommend you to go for corded. This does not mean that you have to plug your mouse in. This is simply the name of the mode, which is the most high performing one. You can also change your lift off distance and either turn motion sync on or off. And for those of you who don't know what motion sync actually does, it synchronizes the input of your mouse to the rate that your PC can actually extract those infos. So you'll always get the most current update of your mouse position for more consistent tracking. However, this is very much a subjective topic, and also a pretty divisive topic in the community because technically it does actually introduce some latency, but it is actually so minimal that it's definitely up to you to decide if you want it or not. If you're unsure, probably just leave it off, but it is worth experimenting and turning it on just to see if you actually feel a difference. And you can also set some macros if you want to, but that's about it for the software. Now, when it comes to my opinion about this mouse, I was very interested in checking this one out, especially because I am a huge fan of the NPO1S shape. That is also why I bought it with my own money. I personally do like the shape quite a bit. I really like the design language of the NPO1S and that asymmetrical style of shape, but I'm not the biggest fan of that extra extra width in the front compared to the NPO-1S, because the NPO-1S just feels that much more comfortable to me in hand, especially because of that narrow width towards the front. It does feel like I'm kind of holding a pencil and just feel kind of one with the mouse. Whilst on the GHERO, it kind of feels a tiny bit more awkward because it is slightly wider towards the front, and it also has that bit more hump towards the rear, which feels a bit more restrictive. But the weirdest thing for me is that this thing is shorter than an NPO-1S. This kind of makes it a tiny bit awkward because it is kind of squished. It's shorter and also a bit wider, which makes it kind of awkward, but I can definitely see people enjoying it because it is definitely more safe. The NPO-1S is pretty narrow, and I can see it being an issue for a lot of people, so having that extra space to be a bit more locked in and also be a bit more safe is definitely something that I can recommend to try out. And also, since this thing is almost 150 euros and this one is only 50 euros, if you're at all interested in asymmetric mice, it's definitely worth checking out. Now, to the conclusion, who is this thing for? If you're at all interested in an asymmetrical shape, or the NPO-1S or the NPO-1, but you simply can't afford it whatsoever, I can definitely recommend checking out the GHERO because it is sort of a mixture of both. Asymmetrical shapes are definitely not for everyone. They are sort of weird because they sit between symmetrical and ergos, but once you get used to it and simply use it in game, I can see a lot of people finding a really good grip with it with a claw grip. I would not recommend it for a fingertip grip, but if you do play either an aggressive or a relaxed claw grip, this is definitely something worth checking out. My hands are 19 by 10. I play an aggressive claw grip, and I can comfortably stay within the limits of the mouse buttons here. So for an aggressive claw grip, I would recommend it all the way up to 20 by 10 or 20 by 11. And for a more relaxed type of claw grip, I wouldn't go for it unless your hands are 19 by 11 or below, since your finger does really reach that end up here. And I kind of hate myself for saying this, but I can also recommend it for a palm grip, since you can plant that thing right on there and simply use it like this. Yet again, I wouldn't really recommend it unless your hands are 20 by 11 or below, since this mouse definitely is pretty short even when you compare it to the NPO-1S. In terms of the weight, the quality, the click tolerances, the corded mode, all of this just makes this a freaking awesome mouse at $50. However, the shape is definitely not for everyone, so keep that in mind. But if you don't care about it being 60 grams and you can get ahead of that, definitely do get this thing. If you are comfortable modding your mouse, you can definitely get it down to 50 grams. And also let me know down in the comments below if you're interested in finding out how you can do base cuts like these and also just modding mice in general, because I'm definitely thinking about doing a really good tutorial for something like this. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell right next to it to be notified of all of my upcoming videos, which will be very similar to this. I only cover the peripheral enthusiast world, so if that is something you'd enjoy, I'll see you guys very soon. Peace out.